Today we're going to look at how can we use files to get input into our Python programs instead of user input, and um, how can we store that information in a dictionary. So I'm going to go over to my PyCharm window. I'm going to create a new Python file, a new program. I'm going to call it files. So this is going to be practice with files and dictionaries. And I'm going to be count the number of letter grades in a file. And this is going to be using a dictionary. And I always put the authorship information. Now, when you're going to be reading in from a file, there's a couple different ways you can do it. As you can see, I've got my file over here in an editor window. This is a simple text file, .txt. In the project, I'm asking you to work with CSV files. Okay, so we've got lettergrades.txt. Now, one way I can do this is by creating a new just file and calling it something like letters.txt right inside of PyCharm. That's one way to do it. The other way you can do it, and that's perfectly fine, you can also copy and paste into that file. The other way to do it is to drag and drop it into the folder where your project is. Okay, so it's going to put it into my practice project folder for me. Okay. And as you can see, it actually moved the file from there. So I'm going to make sure that doesn't happen. So you can see from this file, let's now open it up in PyCharm. We've got lettergrades.txt. It's a list of grades. What I'm going to do is I want to use a dictionary to count the number of times each letter grade occurs and then print them out. So the letters that I'm going to look for are A, B, C, D, and F. And this is going to help me later on so I can loop through these letters to print things out. And I'm going to make a new dictionary. I'm going to call it D, or maybe I'll call it grades. Counts? Count sounds good. And if I recall correctly, we initialize a dictionary with parentheses. I could be misremembering. And now I'm going to try and open this file. So this file, my file name is lettergrades.txt. And I want to loop through all lines in the file. So for line in, and I'm going to open the file for reading. And the first thing I'm going to do is just print out each line. Let's just see what happens. Okay, I'm going to run this to test. Good. Now you might notice I'm printing out on every other line. That means the line I get has a new line at the end of it, which I might want to get rid of. Let's see. So let me try this by saying, let me replace the new line with nothing. And remember, strings are immutable. So if I want this to stay, I have to do it here. I have to assign the value that I've changed here over to here. Now I'm using the replace function. What I'm saying is replace every new line. A new line, that \n is each of these separate lines here, and I'm replacing it with the empty string, so I'm replacing it with nothing. And voila. So now I've removed the new line that I want. If I had commas here, or some other way to separate, so if more than, so let's say if commas, you can use the split function. That's super helpful. Okay, so now I know that print line worked. So now instead of printing the line, what I want to do is I want to count it. So counts dot, I want to get. I'm not sure. Let's go to the slides for a second. I just want to make sure I do this right. And I don't remember. And you know, this might happen to you too. Sometimes you don't remember exactly how everything works, and so you look it up. You can Google it. I happen to know that I've got this on the slides, right? So I want to use the get, but I want to use the get with a default value. Here we go. So where is it? There's like a special, you can have a default item when you use get. Okay. Ah, here it is, yes. So dictionary.get. And then do I have an initialization anywhere here? Oh, an empty dictionary is curly braces. Well, that would be why I wasn't getting the right function names. Okay. So good thing I looked that back up. I was wrong. We're going to use curly braces. And then what I want to do is I want to get the value of the line, because the line is actually the letter. So maybe what I should do is rename this to be letter so that it's clear instead of using a line. Okay, so I'm going to count.get letter. Now what should happen? What should I get if letter doesn't exist? So the dictionary, the first time through, counts as empty. And we want to still get a value here. So my default value is 0. So gets the count of letter if it exists, 0 otherwise. Let me move this above. And I'm going to say count equals counts.getLetter. And then I'm going to store the count back. So counts letter is now going to equal count. Okay, let's see. All right. Now, the trick is, did we get it right? So print out counts. And this is where I'm going to use this list of letters, because it's possible that not all the letters will be counted. So the only way I can do that is by looping through this list. So for ln letters, I'm going to print letter plus colon, and then I'm going to do counts.get letter. Now it's possible, we just said it's possible that a letter doesn't have any grades. So I'm going to use the same get I used up here, where I'm going to return the value of 0 if it doesn't exist. So I'm going to print here just some information for myself. Letter counts. And let's print this out and see what happens. That doesn't look like what I'm looking for. All right, so we got 5 B's. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now that's interesting. Oh, well, first thing is, I notice, letter is not what I'm using in this loop. I used L. So that would be the first problem. Let's try this again. Good, so now I'm printing out everything, but it says everything is 0. Okay. So now we're printing out the line. Oh! Every time I see a count, I want to add 1 to it. That would be why they're all zeros. Because I'm getting the count, and then I want to note that I'm seeing the letter again, and so I add 1 to it. So yes, somewhere, if I'm counting something, somewhere in the program, I need to add 1 to it. All right. So I'm giving you a very realistic example of how you can go about debugging and testing your programs. Aha! And now I've got 0 Fs. I know there were 0 Fs, 1 D, 4 Cs, and 7 Bs and As. Now I didn't count the number of Bs and As, but I know that the Fs and the Ds are right. And what you should be doing ideally is counting and making sure you know the expected values that should be outputted. But that's an example of how we can read in from files and count values using a dictionary and then printing them out. If you don't need to count letters that might not have counts, so for example, if we expected all of these letters to show up, you wouldn't need this array. You can simply count the data that's there, and then you could also loop through. I'll just show you how to do that. So print the dictionary. You would say for, item in counts dot, well, you can do the keys, and then I would print the key plus colon, just like I did before, only now we'd be printing counts key. And use square braces, or item, oops. Gotta get my loop variable names right. So use square braces to determine what value in the dictionary. So dictionaries are really similar to lists, except instead of a number for an index, you get to pick whatever index value you want, string, number, anything. So let's run this. All right, oops, and let me just give myself some file grade counts. Let me give myself some information so I know what's happening. Make it look pretty. All right, let's try this again. Letter counts, file grade counts. So you can see the contents of the dictionary don't include F. And so if you're just counting everything that's in a file, you can go about doing it in this second way.